Today we're happy to be at the SOSORO Museum to pay a visit to EuroCham's ex-executive director, Mr. Blaise Kilian, who is now the co-director of the SOSORO Museum. And it's just such a pleasure to be here. This opened in 2019, just about exactly 5 years ago, so just celebrated its 5th anniversary. And it takes you through the Phnom period, the Angkor Empire, all the way till now, a history of through Cambodia through money. So we really encourage you to check this out if you haven't been here. And we hope you enjoy this interview with Mr. Blaise Kilian. Thank you. Okay, so we're at the SOSORO Museum in downtown Phnom Penh with Mr. Blaise Kilian. Thank you for joining us today. You are the co-director of the museum. Also, previously, before this position, you were the executive director of EuroCham, where we work, of course. So, a pleasure to sit down with you today, and we'll get right into some questions. So, you arrived in Cambodia at a very interesting time, 1999, the same year that Cambodia was admitted to ASEAN, and also, you could say, the first year of no conflict after the Khmer Rouge in the Civil War. So, what was it like to arrive in Cambodia at that time? What did it feel like, and sort of how has it felt to watch it grow over the years till now?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Brian, and thank you to EuroCham for organizing this interview. It's good to keep in touch with EuroCham, even though I've been very busy over the past 3 years and a half. But these are excellent memories, so I'm happy to be on screen here. I arrived in 1999 indeed, and yes, it was the first year after the war completely stopped, because as you know, even beyond the Paris Peace Agreements, you had more armed clashes, and the Khmer Rouge did not surrender until 1998. So in a way, it was the first full post-conflict year. It was very exciting. It was probably also coming from Europe, quite exotic, and I had a good time, but definitely the Cambodian people nowadays have a better time than they had in 1999. When I arrived, one thing you could say is that first of all, Phnom Penh was more like horizontal, nowadays getting vertical. Many roads were not paved yet. During the rainy season it was very muddy. The behavior of the people, the behavior of the consumers, social behavior, everything was quite different from what it is nowadays. And even though I was so excited to come, but back then if someone had told me how Cambodia would be today, I would not have believed it, because the changes we have been through are so extraordinary that it's really probably the most encouraging thought that we may have for the future of Cambodia is to look back and see how far it's coming from. One main difference, I may say, which to me is probably one of the most positive indicator, is that when I arrived, I don't think people had that faith in their future in Cambodia. I'm talking about the Cambodian people. Many people I knew were, looking toward possibly migrating outside, getting visa to stay, as long as possible in Europe or in the USA. Or you could not feel that they were having a plan that they were faithful in building a secure future in Cambodia. And when you look at nowadays, you can see all these youth, they are really, they believe that they can build a future and continue improving and developing their own life in the country. And I think that's the most important difference, is that I believe we are now in a country where the people have faith in their future within this country. And it was probably not that much the case 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable how far the country has come in 25 years. Sometimes it's interesting to look at. I've only been here 4 years, and even in that time, like Koh Peak, for example, Diamond Island has gone from not much there to a lot. So the change is happening so fast. And there's much more important changes than what we do at Chambers and everything. But since you did work at EuroCham, since this is sort of how we have a connection, you were the pioneer of the advocacy program at EuroCham, and I'd just like to ask what it meant to you to pioneer that, and how you see the role of advocacy, and if you've been happy with how we've evolved it since you've left.
Well, I was hired as part of the ICI Plus program, first as advocacy manager, and Ratana Purikalbo was the executive director. And so together we set up indeed some pretty outstanding activities. I'm happy to say that because I think it's our common success to all of us, the team and the board and the members as well, because it has always been very participatory with the members. And the advocacy program was simply, and it is still today, how to set up a platform of dialogue, a venue of dialogue between the royal government and the private sector, because it is extremely important in a country that is growing so fast as Cambodia, that the regulatory framework can accompany this fast development. And because it is developing fast, it is important that the private sector understands what the government wants to do, how they do it, why they want to do it, but also that the government understands what is the feedback and the needs of the private sector in order to foster a development and an economic growth that is efficient, inclusive, and that makes the country even more attractive for investment in general. Right. So the whole objective of this was really not to debate or to challenge, but to accompany the government in their effort to develop an efficient regulatory framework for businesses which were either already inside the country or looking at the possibility to come and invest in the country. And it was very much, it was very exciting. It was a wonderful time. It was probably the most transforming professional experience I had so far, because I could grow with the chamber and with what we did and with the experience. And I believe that we were able to build very much a trust relationship with the government, not because we were here to tell them what they wanted to hear, but because we were here to give honest feedback on what went well, what did not go well, what could be done. And we had many, many discussions. You still have those discussions. Now I'm out of the chamber, but you still have those discussions. And it's always about, understanding each other. Sometimes the government may do things that the private sector do not like, but it is important that they understand why it is being done. And sometimes the private sector has a duty also to tell the government why this or that regulatory framework isn't working or is working well, or could be better implemented, or should be better explained.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been so organic too. I think if you look back to '99 till now, there was, if to think about private sector, public sector dialogue, there's probably none. And
True.
Then, yeah.
When I arrived in 1999, it was more a so-called NGO country, right? It was difficult to have a career back then. You could go to the NGO, or you could go to the UN, or you could go to a few private sector which slowly emerged. Cambodia Airports was one of them. Sorry to raise names, but it was true back then. If you had a job in Cambodia Airports, it was like, okay, you're secure for many years to come. But it was difficult to project yourself as having a career and grow with a job on the long term. As development continued, as the economic growth went further and accelerated, you had more and more investors coming, Cambodian investors as well, and foreign investors. Don't forget that Cambodia is a major investor in Cambodia itself, which is very important. And therefore, you could see more and more private structures growing, and you could finally project yourself in having a career in Cambodia and not just jumping from one NGO job to the other. But when I first arrived in 1999, it was more like a so-called NGO country. The transition was not easy towards a more private sector-led economy, right? Fundings from NGO dried, at least in some areas. Some people had to migrate from the NGO world to the private sector world, and in a way this is myself what I did when I moved from UNESCO, which is UN agency, but still to the chamber. But I think it was overall it's profitable for the country. You still have NGOs, of course, they still have a role to play, but you have more and more of a private sector. You have more and more employment generated by the private sector, and people can more and more have opportunities to build a career and a future inside Cambodia and grow with the country.
Okay, I see, yes, and I feel very lucky. I've had the best jobs in my career in Cambodia, and that's just a testament, like you said, in '99 there weren't many. I know you worked at Cambodia airports too, so you're one of the first ones to get one of those good jobs. But yeah, it might be a good time to talk about now then how we're on the precipice of even more change. So there is industry and everything, but now there's many different things at play, including when Cambodia graduates from a least developed country to a upper middle income, or the next stage, I think it's upper middle income country. You lose some trade benefits and maybe you get some less funding from NGOs and everything. So it's another turning point. And just with digitalization, that there is more opportunity for young people, but it feels like there's still a little bit more to do to create a nice, healthy job market for everyone because I think a lot of people still go abroad for jobs or for education, but it's getting there. So I guess having said all that, I would just like to ask, I mean, how hopeful are you for the future? How quickly do you see these changes occurring? Is it a few years or longer? And not to mention, we have a new government for the first time in 38 years. So that's a lot. How does all of this make you feel?
Well, like I said first, looking back to the past 25 years, you can only be hopeful for the next 25 years. I mean, again, if somebody had told me how Cambodia would look today when I first arrived in 1999, I probably would not have believed this person, even though I was so excited to be here. So this is in itself a huge inspiration and a huge source of hope for the future, because Cambodia is so much more resilient and able to transform itself and to keep evolving than most people think. Okay. Of course, you do have sectors that need more input and development and investment, and education is one of them. Vocational training is one of them. It's very important because the next phase where we are going hopefully to move from a cheap labor intensive economy, which played its part for a long time, to something where you have more added value, more contribution from the skilled perspective, more diversification of partners, more diversification of the industrial output, more assembly, more maybe electronic components, all these kind of things. You need, of course, definitely education, you need vocational training, you need skills. And so this is one of the area where there is a lot of input needed, right? You have other sectors which are in need of inputs as well, starting with health, which is very important as well, healthcare in general. So I think that we do have a new government, as you say, which we all understand it's more like change within continuity. So it's going to be probably, it's already probably discussed on how Cambodia can transition to this next phase of higher added value, more diversification. I believe that it will continue. It's never easy. I think we have to give credit to everyone from the public and private sector who has contributed to making Cambodia what it is today. But the job is not finished. It's never finished. When you are in charge of a country or a company, you have to keep going. And so hopefully the next years will see this improvement in education, in healthcare, in diversification, in vocational training, in skills, and also maybe in dispute resolutions on many fields.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. And I'd like to, since we are in the Money Museum, we might as well talk about money at least a little bit. This is a fascinating museum, first of all, and it traces currency back from the Funan to the Angkor, all the way till now, the Angkor Empire. So I'd like to ask, as we look towards the future, of course, the US dollar is in play now. It's been in place since the 90s, I'd say. But there's a big push from the NBC and the wider country to strengthen the real, stand by the real, possibly reduce or definitely reduce the use of the US dollar. And then on top of that, you have electronic real transactions are just multiplying by an incredible amount. So where do you see the future of the real? Is this a good sign? Do you think this is a good sign for the strength of the real, the increase of digitalization, and how do you see the real and the US dollar interacting in the future? Okay,
first maybe a little bit of background. Dollarization was never a choice by Cambodia. Dollarization is an interesting externality of the UN intervention in Cambodia. There was no political decision, there was no administrative decision to dollarize the economy, but somehow it happened during the UN intervention. If you want to know more, you can come and visit the SOSORO Museum. So it's something that happened, and it did play a role for a certain time, it's true. It did reassure investors, it did reduce the exchange rate risk for investors. It probably brought some stability. So during a certain time, dollarization played its part in the Cambodian economic success story. Now, Cambodia is stabilized, Cambodia is at peace, Cambodia is a fast-growing economy, and Cambodia, like any other economy, had to go through some crises, especially the COVID crisis, right? And during this time, the realization that dollarization is somehow hampering, limiting the ability to use the monetary policy as part of the overall policy mix was very much visible. And so there is an understanding that in order for the economic policy to be more efficient, in order for the country to be able to use all the tools that it needs in order to manage the economy, well, dollarization somehow is a limitation on that. Now, there is also, I think, a very deep understanding, but for this you would have to go to the NVC colleagues who are in charge of monetary policy. I'm just in charge of the museum, and we'll be clear on that. There is an understanding of the very psychological bond, you know, or link that is that exists between people and money. I mean, trust is the most important part. Why do we accept this piece of paper as a mode of payment? It's because we trust the value, and therefore, of course, administratively, you can one day just say, you know, now no more dollar, only real. But this is not the way. The way is really to progressively, slowly, but you know, with a lot of determination, build awareness about the importance of the national currency, about the importance of the real, about the role it can play in the economy, to encourage the banking sector and the economic agents to use more and more real, but without forcing, without pushing too much, and always, you know, keeping in mind that this is all about psychology and trust. Right. So I think this is what is being implemented right now. You have a lot of different initiatives, regulation with the banking sector, organization of the Real Day, you know, a museum like this one, which is also a tool to raise awareness. But this is a very long-term strategy, and this is up, of course, to the National Bank and the people who are in charge. But now, if you look at my personal experience, I remember when I first arrived in 1999, for me, as an individual economic agent like many others, dollar was very much used at every level. The real was basically like cents, you know, like petty cash, like change. Yeah. If I look at my own consuming experience, nowadays I spend much more real than before, but also the amount of expense for which I can use the real is much higher than 25 years ago. If I go to a fancy restaurant and I spend, I don't know, $100 on a good meal with a few friends, I can pay in real. I would think about it, and the shop owner or the restaurant owner would accept it. 25 years ago, I would not even think about it, and probably people would not even, you know, think about accepting it. So the amount of transaction that is being made in real at an individual level has definitely increased. I have also an interesting anecdote. A few months ago, I went to Ratanakiri for a workshop with colleagues from other museums, and we were, you know, having dinner, and I wanted to pay, and for whatever reason, I only had dollars in my pocket, and so it was not so expensive. I think it was about $20, and so I pulled my $20 or $50, I don't remember, banknote to pay, and the shop owner was not happy. She told me, you pay in dollar, but this is not so easy to spend, so I'd rather you paying the bill in real. And I was very surprised myself, because I didn't think it could, you know, go that far. So it shows you that mentality has changed. And again, this trust relationship, this psychological relationship that must exist between the economic agent and money has changed over time. And I was very surprised that this restaurant owner in Ratanakiri was not happy that I would pay her with a dollar banknote.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yes,
yeah.
And now the digital banking, of course, with this whole, you know, QR code and scan, and the KHQR and the Bakong system, first of all, we use more and more digital payment. So we have less and less money in our pocket, actually. Sometimes I realized that for a whole, you know, months, I didn't have even one banknote in my pocket. It's a bit destabilizing when you think about it, because we are not used to it. But it's a fact, and so we use more and more the QR code. And when the price is set in real, then you can pay directly in real. And then with all these initiatives that the National Bank has implemented to facilitate cross-border payment with the digital system, with the QR code, it works if you pay from your real account. So this also is going to encourage people to use the real more and more. Right. So all this context is somehow encouraging people to use more real, but also the psychological relationship has changed, and now we are more inclined to naturally use real than before.
Yeah. Personally, too, I've seen this. I feel like people used to like revere the US dollar, and even I didn't like to use it because if there was a small tear or a smudge of ink or something, they would not accept. So that was one of the first reasons I stopped using it. Then, of course, the ATMs only issued hundreds. So there's been like little things that move the needle, yes. And now I only use real, even when I'm scanning with the QR code, because I think it's more often than not cheaper than paying in dollars too. So yes, I always use real. It's all I use. I don't ever have American money on me. You still see some ones floating around, but I understand the 1s and 5s are completely gone. Okay, so before we go, we can talk quickly about the museum. I know you just refurbished or reintroduced the exhibitions on independence, Khmer independence, the Khmer Republic, and the Khmer Rouge. And we're standing in one of those new rooms now, or sitting. So yeah, tell me about, please, if you wouldn't mind, tell me about how proud you are of these new exhibits and why people should come see them.
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of the museum itself, and I can say it because I did not make this museum. It was created before I arrived, so I have no complex in saying how good it is. Then, of course, like every other museum, we constantly work on improving, expanding, adding new elements to the exhibition. So this is what we have been doing. Over the past 3 years, we have made a few changes here and there. We added during COVID this huge screen where the symbols on all the banknotes are being explained to the visitor in order to show that the images displayed on the banknote are related to the idea of the Khmer nation. Every banknote is supposed to convey symbols of national identity. It's true in every country and in Cambodia as well. And then last year we worked very hard to revamp the permanent exhibition halls, which are dedicated, as you just said, to independence, London era, and the Khmer Rouge era. And so we are very happy because we wanted, first of all, this part to better reflect its importance in Cambodia's history. So we expanded the part dedicated to independence. We thought it was very important. Two, we also wanted visitors to have access to more items which are being displayed, mostly audiovisual items. We have been able to gather more audiovisual archives from INA in France, from the French Ministry of Defense, from British Pathé, from other personal collections, and even Her Majesty the Queen Mother was kind enough to allow us to use some archives as well. And then finally, we also wanted to have a better circuit flow of visitors within the museum so that the visitors could have the opportunity to see every part of the museum. So these are the reasons why we made these changes, and we are very happy with the result. It was inaugurated not so long ago, as you know, and we have more plans in the future because the museum will constantly keep evolving depending on what new items we find, what research brings us in terms of new information, or what opportunity we see in improving the visitor's experience. We also have our program of temporary exhibition. Last week, we inaugurated a new temporary exhibition on the pagoda paintings, not about religion, but about how the artists of the time, throughout the whole 20th century until 1970, somehow inserted into religious paintings some elements of modernity which reflected their time, so you have interesting things like alarm clocks or car tires, or electric wires or planes which appear, in paintings which are telling the life of the Buddha or his previous life, which is very interesting. We have more programs to go. We also, of course, are working on the development of our second museum in Battambang province, which should open probably sometimes next year. So there is a lot to do, and in all of this, our main curator, Jean-Daniel Gardère, is involved as usual. So he is somehow the person who is making all the research and creating the scenography in coordination with the museum direction and with our partners from Moulin Rouge who are doing all this scenography. So there is a lot of work actually, and you may think that the museum is quiet, but first of all, we work very hard for our museum not to be quiet. So we have a number of visitors which is constantly increasing, and also we have a lot on our plate. So we are quite busy, and as you know, we are quite active in communicating as well. Right. So we have a lot to do, and we have many more plans to come. We'll have also more publications. We are collaborating with SIPA to make hopefully a publication this year. So temporary exhibitions, publications, events as well. EuroCham 2 years ago, I think, was kind enough to organize its toast to the new year in our garden. So our garden is an area also to host events. We have our own conferences, we have our own exhibitions, but we also welcome proposals by external partners simply to make this part of the museum as lively as possible, because we want people to be able to come in and out, to know about the museum, to discover it, to hear about it, and to spread the word so that our image and the frequentation of the museum keeps increasing, which has been the case over the past 3 years and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say it's so impressive. Even it seems to change year by year. I visited a few years ago and already I'm noticing a lot of new additions. And yeah, I can't forget about the courtyard and the cafe too. I'll never forget the first time I went to the courtyard. There was a classical pianist and someone playing the clarinet. It's just such an ideal setting right in the middle of the city. So
Yes.
I look forward to all of these new improvements and additions, and of course encourage everyone to visit. I myself will take another tour. But thank you so much for taking the time today to tell us about the museum and how you've experienced Cambodia over the years. And of course, we can stay in touch and hope to see you at future EuroCham events.
Thank you, and I wish I had more time to join EuroCham events. I should join more often, but EuroCham is still very much probably the most transforming experience of my professional career. So there is always something about EuroCham.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.